FAP at the next FAP meeting. Maybe we can come up with a list of additional groups. The FAP is the Finance, Audit and Planning group, but we also invite any others to send in names of who we would like to move to get beyond SCAN and the Community Association, which is the objective expressed by Councillor Murdoch.
Any more discussion? Councillor Dermott.
Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, you know, the intent was flexibility. It might be decided, staff might decide, or council might direct staff that we put an advertisement in the Saanich News. We are looking, you know, council is intending to involve the public warrant, we welcome your input at such and such.
Councillor Sanders.
Just going to be very brief. I do agree with Councillor Murdoch. I think that you know, we just can't pump this around. I think we've got a report, and I think we need to make a motion on that.
Councillor Berglund and Brown.
I guess for me, I'm just looking at opening up the process a little more than what we have had. And come budget time, should we have an extra 50,000 in our budget that we don't know what to do with, and we want to start putting serious money into it? I think at that time, I think we can give it some serious thought again as to how we really do want to move ahead, if we're prepared to move ahead in a very serious way. Thank you.
Councillor Brownhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if I agree with my colleagues, Councillor Murdoch and Sanders, but at this time I don't know what our budget financial issues are. The second part of this is $50,000. I think the first process could be asking some of these groups, and SCAN isn't the only group, as I've said before. A lot of community groups don't belong to SCAN. You know, the Friends of Knockenhill, Friends of Mount Dad, the Chamber of Commerce. So I think they could be asked. But the other thing I was thinking of is, why can't we have something on our website where people could respond to a questionnaire, or whether they could respond to, these are the suggestions, what one do you see as meaningful and how we can reach out. You know, I think we should use some of our resources that we have, and I know that will take some money as well. But I'm just not comfortable going out there while the governance review is happening and going out with another process at the same time. So.
Thank you. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may have a misunderstanding of the direction, but I would assume in voting for Councillor Dermond's motion that I would be inviting SCAN to give us input on a process that we might follow. In which case, if they picked up on our invitation, I would fully expect that they could come back and give us a sense of the breadth of the organizations that might need to be included. This is presumably coming as a report back from staff, and when we got that report back, we didn't feel it was fulsome enough. We could always add to it. But I think in supporting the motion to ask SCAN, I'm asking SCAN to give us broader input, you know, just their own community association. I'm saying I've got confidence in them that they would be able to collectively decide which groups and organizations could be touched. So if I have the correct understanding of the motion, I don't think we need to start tacking on all bits and pieces of groups that need to be included. I think SCAN is quite, if they're interested, if they take us up on the invitation, quite capable of providing that feedback to us.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps we can start with SCAN and then move to the community associations, and then move on from there. It's sort of treated in a tiered format, but leaving the motion as is so that there's the option of going further if we need to. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Murdoch, Councillor Sanders are opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. All right, let's move to the next item, number 4.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. This next item is the draft 2015-2018 strategic plan. The report from the Chief Administrative Officer is recommending the Council approve the revisions to the draft plan as outlined in the report, and the Council adopt the revised 2015 to 2018 strategic plan. Mr. Mayor.
Move the recommendation.
Any discussion? Councillor Durham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support the recommendation. I'd like to thank staff very much for the strategic plan. I think it continues to get better every year. There are, I think, ways that can still continue to improve, and I look forward to providing that kind of input in the future. And I also think that that's the kind of thing we might again get from the governance review as to how well we're doing with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wortman.
Thank you very much. I just looked at a couple items there, number of kilometers of new bike lanes, too low, so we increase it. Number of kilometers of new sidewalks, too low, we increase it. And I guess it would be interesting to know, not tonight, but somewhere down the line, do we have reason to justify how we are going to increase it? Is it tied to budgets? Is it tied to development? Or is it just a hope so? Just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Platt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, if I may, to staff through you. The Healthy Sandwich Committee, for example, provided some feedback, and I'm not necessarily sure it ended up being inculcated into the report. I'm just wondering what the method is for letting people who did suggest amendments or changes or providing feedback, how that feedback is then received and acknowledged. And I'm not sure who to ask that to, so I apologize in advance.
There's a lot of finger pointing going on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, a number of those issues have been included in the plan. You'll agree with staff. You'll see the staff comments that are there. The other information will be provided to council for review in your 2016 strategic plan, and you'll have those and be able to decide whether you want to include those and how you want to handle those at that time.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that those comments don't disappear, so to speak, and that they do get fed back into council, because obviously when people and committees give opinions, you want to know that somehow that's being kept for future reference. So thank you for answering that. I support the motion on the table.
Councillor Haynes?
I'm going to thank staff, as my colleagues have, but also continue the point from Councillor Plan and build it out to the comments from John Schmuck, who's the current chair of SCAN. How do we track the inputs from the different groups that are not council or advisory committees? And it's not to say that the advice from any group has to be included, because there's some different approaches and different thinkings and different contingencies, but how do we give feedback to them to say, these ones were useful, we liked them, we could work with those, these ones we could not. Not to, what I'm worried about here on one side is creating an endless loop, but at the same time giving positive feedback to SCAN. And I recall we had the same request when I was chair of SCAN, that we'd made some recommendations and we didn't see them in the report, so we wondered, well, why did we do all that? And particularly, as we just heard today, we're looking to SCAN to maybe help us with the budget approach to budget. It's important, I think, for all groups to get some feedback, but how is that done without adding a never-ending workload?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Haynes, as I said, we have a number of feedbacks that came from the groups, and you'll see those are reflected on the pages and staff concurrence, and we made minor changes to the plan. Those other issues will be forwarded to council, and if council feels those should be advanced to the 2016 plan, we can do that. Now, we have a lot of different inputs, and a lot of them aren't direct answers in terms of yes or no. They're suggestions, and those things have been received and will be forwarded to council. If there's any specific requests that may come forward in terms of those particular proposals or letters, we would certainly advise those groups accordingly.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank staff. This is always such an interesting process for us, and then it's attached with the budget and the work plans and stuff. So it does get better every day or every year. So to Councillor Wergland's comment about increasing cycling and sidewalks, you know, they can be increased with grants, as we've seen over the years. Sometimes we go way beyond that. If we have a grant, a green grant, that they can incorporate those into it. So although those numbers may seem low to some people, I wonder what they would have been on average. But I support it. And I do want to just refer, there was a comment from one of the, might have been from Mount Tommy. We do produce a smaller version, do we not, for public consumption? A smaller version?
To our administrator?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have that. It's available on the web. We have copies that are available, will be available in draft print form, so that information is available in any format that anyone would like access to.
Thank you very much.
Any more discussion? So the recommendation is that council approve the revisions to the draft strategic plan as outlined in the report, and that council adopt the revised strategic plan. Then I'll call the question on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 5.
Thank you. This next item is the zoning bylaw amendment, prohibition of float homes or other floating vessels. The report of the Director of Planning is recommending that council amend the zoning bylaw by adding a new section to prohibit uses as outlined in the report.
Move the recommendation. Councilor Dermott for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question of staff. Mr. Wixon expressed rather strongly his disappointment about our ability to move a boat from the gorge. Do we have any jurisdictional ability to do that in the current situation, or do we have any procedures set up to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the issue of derelict boats or ones that may be considered wrecks, there are very specific definitions within the Canada Shipping Act and the federal regulations. The issues we have in place are really consultative with other levels of government, and I can tell you that with respect to that specific issue, it was mentioned that we didn't take any action. Well, we did. We contacted the Ministry of Environment, who did advise that if there was no oil spills, it wasn't their issue. We did contact Transport Canada, and they have a very elaborate process. If you want to claim a wreck, you need to go through a formal process with them, and that does take considerable time. We have been in contact with the City of Victoria in terms of the motions and their movements forward to try and deal with another way to resolve this issue. And we've also been in discussion with their solicitor. Specifically with respect to derelict boats, separate from the report you have in front of you tonight, we are very limited. We have been through, and there's lots of documentation, calls for cooperation between the various local governments, but we do not have the authority to go in and remove a boat without putting the District of Saanich in considerable liability and in violation of federal regulations. We have talked to the federal government. If in fact what we are trying to do is find the owner and have that boat removed, if in fact that's not done, then Saanich may be in the position of having to make an application to the federal government to basically take ownership of that wreck after a period of time. And that is a lengthy process, and we have to make sure we match and meet all the regulations of both Transport Canada and the Canada Shipping Act.
Thank you to the Administrator. My sense was it was an extremely complex interjurisdictional issue, and that at times ties our hands and our ability, unfortunately, to deal swiftly with those problems. I certainly support the motion in front of us. I think it's a step forward in strengthening within the jurisdictional authority that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. My question, just looking at what we have here, the change is stated as so. It says, prohibited uses B, the anchoring or merge of any vessel for a continuous period exceeding 72 hours. So my question directed at staff would be, specific to this particular derelict vessel that's been in the news and has been raised tonight, how would this change to our bylaw affect our ability to act on this derelict vessel?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question, because that has led to some considerable confusion. The short answer is it would not. The bylaw that's before you tonight is a minor change to a bylaw which is in place, which prohibits residency on float homes within 300 meters of Saanich. Within the court cases that have been looked at, the ruling has come down that under the Canada Shipping Act, you cannot prohibit a boat from anchoring. What we've determined, and the court has said, that if you provide a reasonable time, you can enforce that with your zoning bylaws. 72 hours has been deemed to be reasonable, and we believe is supportable. With respect to the shipwrecks or the derelict boats, that is an entirely separate process. This bylaw does not address it. The only way we can address that is through Transport Canada and the process they have set out in their regulations.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Workman?
Thank you very much. Just a quick question to staff. Was a response sent to Gord Stillicum to address a written concern? It was indicated that it got no response from Saanich as far as they're concerned.
Mr. Mayor, I can only tell you that I know that there's been correspondence directed to the Mayor and Council. I have attempted to provide Council the information to answer any of those queries. I have had phone calls. I have had a couple of emails. With any of the inquiries that came to me at this point, I have answered all of those. We'll continue to do so. That's not necessarily to the satisfaction of some people, because of course the concern for the wrecked boat there is disturbing. It's very frustrating that it can't be removed, the fact that it's involved in a multi-jurisdictional process here, and the regulations are set out, but I certainly made it clear in terms of what our responsibilities are, and we tried through both our bylaw department and contact with other partners to try, and we'll continue to see if we can get a remedy to the situation.
Thank you, and thanks to staff.
Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, I'll talk to this briefly. The letter of September the 14th was addressed to the Mayor and Council, and as more information became available, I was corresponding with Scott with the frequent but not 100% capture of CCs to Rob Wixon, who are the President and Vice President of the Gord Stillicum Community Association. So I tried to share with them the approach that Saanich was taking, that we were investigating changes to our approaches as possible and to understand the multi-jurisdictional issues involved, that the Victoria permit of occupation does not actually address anchoring of boats because that cannot override Ministry of Transport right to navigation and right to anchorage. One of the problems with right to anchorage, and I went out and chatted to people who've managed marinas, one of the points with anchorage and the 72 hours that we have is that that's a federal law. To change that is a huge and monumental task that I can't imagine is going to be possible. All my advice around that is that it's not. The 72 hours means that they can anchor because it may be distress, or they're in emergency, or they want to get water or food. It's a marine transportation law. What we can say is you can only moor or anchor for 72 hours. The problem is that the point of anchor may be stable, but the boat moves around it. And people who've tried to enforce that with people that are belligerently not willing to move their boat is proving that they haven't moved their point of anchor. Because the boat moves, how do you know the anchor hasn't moved? And how far do they have to move the anchor? 10 meters and then get another 72 hours. So I'm not at all convinced that what Victoria has in place is going to work. The liveaboards, therefore, whilst we have the 72-hour strengthening of our bylaw, may still face very difficult enforcement. But the issue today is not a liveaboard, it's what looks to be a wreck. And I understand from talking to Scott Carps that he was in touch with the owner of that boat, and that owner lives on another boat that is still anchored closer to Victoria in the gorge, and that boat, the boat that is the catamaran that is currently beached in the gorge, was a live-on that was rented out or loaned out to a colleague of the owner, and that boat was moved, and then we don't know why it was moved, but then broke its mooring and drifted to shore. Now you're in salvage and wreck regulations, and it's very difficult to know who would move it when the jurisdictions that are responsible for it are not stepping forward and taking action. So the option then is for the municipality to go out and unilaterally move it. And we're hearing from our legal advice, it is not appropriate for the municipality to do that unless it wants to take on extreme liability and costs. Now, within the community association, Scott, you've been in touch with the owner. The best solution is to talk to the owner and get his permission such that it can be moved. In the absence of talking to the owner directly, I understand that you know who he is and maybe you can contact him. In the absence of that, we are tied to the federal regulations. Now, having heard your frustration tonight and Rob's frustration tonight, let me reassure you that although it wasn't on the council agenda last week as you requested, one of the reasons was the agenda was full, but we're also checking the I's and dotting the T's, or preferably crossing the T's and dotting the I's. This is an issue that's very difficult, and I would ask you for patience and understanding as we try to deal with it. The shortcut is to find the owner and ask him if we can move it. With his permission, it can be moved. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very good suggestion, but I don't know how we deal with the case where we can't find the owner. We have a truly derelict boat. Yes. I think we're going to need another motion after this, which I might suggest as I think about it. So we have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. So we call the question on the motion to amend this bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. This is a situation which is going to keep coming back, and it's been an ongoing and long-standing problem for Victoria as well. It is an issue of multi-jurisdictional agencies, levels of government, and these boats are literally falling through the cracks. We don't have a lot of tools in order to address it. Clearly there are great concerns from residents and the community associations about taking action and being able to deal with these things. We heard there was no action. There has been action, but the vote is still there. And the people that have been called to take interest in it, I'm not sure whether or not they have gone and taken a good look at the boat. I have had some conversations with the administrator, and I'm fairly well satisfied that we have looked at this and looked at the options that are available to us. I think at this point we now have to go beyond Saanich and look for some kind of assistance, whether it's through CRD management of the waterway or raising this with our neighbors and then using a unified voice to then talk to a higher level of government or something like that. But we need some kind of motion going forward in order to do something. Councillor Dermott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a long-standing issue. Motions on the issue of derelict boats in several cases have been brought to UBCM and indeed FCM. I would be happy to move that this council send a motion to AVICC to continue that process, expressing the concern of the inability of municipal jurisdictions to deal with the problem of derelict boats.
Second. All right, discussion on this?
And I would say briefly after that, I would also add to the motion that we send a letter copying our concerns to all the federal MPs in this area. And hopefully that might stimulate some concern. And MLAs previous.
Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm always supportive, but I don't want to rain on Amy's parade, but I know that Councillor Bryce and I, myself, have both had a kick at this in the last 10 years we've been here. And, you know, we've gone this circle, we've seen it at UBCM, and, you know, it's FCM and such, and, you know, as I say, I don't want to rain on Amy's parade, but it's a problem, and they were Cadbury Bay, and to address this, it's, I keep saying because I don't know where to go with this, except that it's a difficult one, and Councillor Bryce, you could speak to it too, and you know your success was as good as mine.
Councillor Haynes?
There are three categories of boat. There's the wreck that's sinking in the water, but is highly polluted. And then there's the wreck like we have right now, which doesn't seem to be polluted. It's a catamaran. I believe that it was looked at. I understand from talking to Chief Downey, they did go out and look at it. I don't know if they went out and actually tested the water around it, but it doesn't look like it's leaking oil, etc. But a solution is available to avoid people anchoring on the gorge. And this is how it was described to me. Down in Oak Bay, there's a marina, and they had trouble with liveaboards anchoring in the marina. So the then owners of the marina and the people trying to enforce clear waters and going to the agencies just like we're looking at doing, ended up going for an alley of navigation. An alley of navigation, where you mark it with buoys, and nobody can anchor in that space because it's navigational access. So that navigation supersedes anchorage. Navigation is more important than anchorage. And the idea is that boats would always have safe access through the navigational alley into the marina. So anyone who wants to anchor is outside that. So one option to consider is that the gorge is dedicated as a navigational alley. And it would have to have yellow buoys marking it. It's quite the process to get us there. But this is something that could be added to this process, and I don't think it's been tried before. But that's one of the things I found out and I wanted to bring this evening. A navigational alley all the way up the gorge.
Thank you. Can I hear from the administrator about the nature of the geography we're dealing with and where the provincial jurisdiction takes over from the federal jurisdiction?
That's a very good question, Mr. Mayor, and it's not simple. So the regulations for navigation are under the Canada Shipping Act, and they're dealt with through the federal government. The province has responsibility for the Crown foreshore. The province does management of the underbed on behalf of the federal government in that area. So the piece that we're bringing tonight is the local governments can zone areas in order to deal with the liveaboard situation, which Saanich has had for a multiple number of years. We are just strengthening that tonight. So it's defined as a 300 meter setback. We think that's probably, I understand what Councillor Haynes is saying, but from a perspective of navigation, we think that the bylaw that you've got in place is effective and will deal with that situation. Of course, it has to be enforced. But there's multiple agencies in each of those jurisdictions. We're dealing with the Navigation, or the Canada Shipping Act. We're dealing with the Navigation Protection Program, which deals with shipwrecks. I can quote you from their regulations here very briefly. A person who finds a vessel or wreck is not generally entitled to take the vessel or wreck into the possession or destroy the vessel. A ship that goes aground or cargo is lost over the side, or any ship, you need to apply to the navigation program. So there are multiple jurisdictions within agencies you need to go through. So yeah, I appreciate it's complicated, but the primarily federal responsibility is Transport Canada, Ministry of Environment on this, and then also, of course, Crown Lands.
Thank you.
So it's multiple.
Understood. It's very complicated. So just to understand this, if it runs aground and it's leaking oil, it's the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment.
Yes.
And if it runs aground and it's not leaking oil, whose responsibility is it then?
That is undetermined. I can tell you the responsibility, the regulations around it are the Canada Shipping Act and the navigation program, in which if we wanted to take some action, we'd have to make an application to take ownership of that vessel, which they go through a long period and they would go through a process, after which time the municipality would take on any liability. The regulations are set out, and I can provide this to members of the public or who want to have it on two different documents that both the federal and the province have provided.
All right, thank you. Councilor Brown.
Yeah, I just want to say, we've been dealing with this, not only us, but a lot of municipalities on the island. I've just pulled up a report that said a BCMP proposed legislation giving the Coast Guard the regulatory power it needs to take action against derelict and abandoned vessels in BC waters was rejected by the federal government. Bill C-638, an act to amend the Canada Shipping Act, was introduced in the House as a private member's bill. The objectives and purposes were obligate the government to act when the derelict vessels are abandoned, strengthen the requirements relating to derelict vessels by ensuring the regulations are made to establish measures to be taken for their removal, disposition, and destruction, and provide the Canadian Coast Guard shall be designated as a receiver of wreck for the purposes, and requires receiver of wreck to take reasonable steps to determine and locate the owners of the wreck. So that didn't pass in the House. So it's an issue that's been many motions, as my colleagues have said, but that was a federal MP that took it to the House as a private member's bill on the island, and it was rejected.
Was that recently?
June Crowley. The post was made 2015.
Okay. Councilor Dermy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I quite agree with Councilor Brownlow, and I'm aware of that. The thing that may be positive is the fact that shortly we will have a new federal government. So I think it's worth reinitiating the process of going through the right channels, writing the MPs and the MLAs, and who knows, perhaps we might be successful this time around.
Should I call the question on the motion to then write to the association